Good morning, Josh. Good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Richard. Yeah. Welcome back. I think were you traveling? Was it vacation or work related?
It was not vacation, but it wasn't exactly work either. So I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but I was out in
Okay.
California.
Staying busy. Yeah, understood. I'm glad to have you back. I've got a few things that I wanted to cover with you today, man, but maybe during your trip here, I wanted to start in a little bit of an interesting spot and see if you've had the chance. This has been out a few months. Have you had the chance to see this Gaming Wall Street?
I haven't seen it. I've heard about it.
Okay.
I wasn't willing to pay HBO Max, the money to sign up in order to watch it because I think I already know it all, right? But I was excited to see that this had been done and that, some of this information is reaching a wider audience.
Mm. I am one of the unfortunate ones that I do pay for HBO Max. I am a Game of Thrones connoisseur, and this fits right into that bucket. So when I saw
Sure.
this pop up, I'm like, I've got to see what this is about.
Yeah, no, somebody saw it and said, I gotta watch it. And I actually tried to find it on the airplane, but they didn't have it. So
Man, I'm gonna give you my login. You have to watch
okay.
this.
All right. If you give me your login, I won't tell HBO and then I'll watch it.
For the folks that haven't seen it, we won't spend much time here. This is about, and we've covered this in the show a handful of times, just the retail investing community that fought back. And maybe we point to the Reddit subthreads, maybe we point elsewhere, but
So
this
just for
community.
our non-video audience, we're talking about
Mm,
Gaming Wall Street, which is a little two-part series on HBO Max, which
exactly.
is about the kind of Robinhood, GameStop, um, etc.
You're spot on.
Binge, etc.
Yeah. It's interesting because it kind of reminded me of this documentary, not as obviously expensive to film, of Icarus, where it's like you think it's going one direction. I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix, but it's like you think they're going one direction, but about midway through the documentary, they learn something, and they're like, "Wait a minute!" And then the whole film shifts a different direction. The whole idea of the documentary shifts a different direction here, and maybe it was intentional, maybe it was just really really good producing, but they went from like really getting you bought into the emotional side of the retail investor, and then they slowly pivot into look at these games that Robinhood's playing to
Mm-hmm.
protect the hedge funds, protect these massive investors, where
Yeah.
they basically shut off the buy button. You could only sell certain stock. I mean, there's some crazy stuff, and I've got about halfway through episode 2, and it is sticky, man. It's really really good. So worth a watch. I'll give you my login.
Okay. I mean,
um
I've been talking about this for 2 years,
I 100%. That's why I'm so stoked about it. Yeah, I'm like, this is right down your alley.
Yeah.
Um, Let me ask you, and we do this often. I think, every time we connect, I try to kick off a call with this. Started a little differently today, but I just kind of ask for like a temperature check, and I'm guiding you a little bit here. But Monday, Nasdaq saw the lowest that we've seen in 2 years. If I rattle off everything else, Nasdaq is down 32% year to date. The S&P 500 24% year to date. Bitcoin, Ethereum, 58 and 64% respectively down year to date. I actually pulled and highlighted some words. This is JP Morgan's CEO. Let me read you this, or just some excerpts, and then I'll get your thoughts. But JP Morgan CEO on Monday, inflation and rising interest, the war in the Ukraine, these are very, very serious, is his sort of perspective, and what's weighing on the economy and where we're going. He says, based on these three sort of variables, this is going to put the U.S. economy into a recession 6 to 9 months from now. He says, I'm not sure how bad it's going to be. Uncertain is how bad the recession is going to be, but I'm not predicting a mild dip. Maybe just a broad stroke, man. How are you feeling where we're at? It could be about this. It could be broader out, zoomed out, but just a temperature check.
Well, the CPI number came out this morning, hotter than expected. And I think it's possible today is the bottom.
Mhm.
I've been looking for a kind of washout bottom. I think a lot of people are, though. And we got down pretty good this morning, pretty close. We are in October, which is going back to the very first financial site I ever built, seasonaltrader.com, is always a bullish, time into the end of the year and early January, or at least 90+% of the time. So I'm looking for a tradable bottom here. I don't think it's going to be the long-term bottom, but I do think that we're getting close to a very tradable bottom. That's kind of the technical side of it. When I look at the kind of fundamentals side of it, I still have grave misgivings about the world that we're living in and the mistakes that we're making, the divisions in the United States and in the world that are, really kind of existential issues, the debt, etc. So, but you always feel that way at bottoms. And whether this is the bottom or not, my mantra all along is that you have to be positioning yourself for a lot of uncertainty and volatility, and don't really focus on picking the bottom or nailing the top, but making sure that you're comfortable with whatever scenario could happen. So back when we were in late 21 and I felt we were getting near a top, I said, I'm not getting out of the market altogether, but I'm selling enough that if the market does go down dramatically from here, that I'm going to be able to sleep at night still, right? I'm going to feel okay about that. And look, I've been hit by these corrections. I didn't liquidate everything in November of 21 like some, stock market timing genius. I didn't try to do that, right? I got out with some profits. I got comfortable with my position. I was okay if the things fell 50%, and with what I had in the markets, and I'm still okay with that. So I think right now we're closer to the opposite end of the spectrum. This is a time when you have to be thinking about being a buyer more than being a seller, especially if you're not in at all, right? Because I do think over the next few years, we will rally, but we could go down considerably from here still. It's not out of the question. So you have to be okay with both scenarios and figure out kind of your own timeline, your own risk tolerance, and position yourself accordingly for that. Got to get out of this game of like trying to nail it and then having feelings about how smart or dumb we are, depending on whether we succeeded or not, and then being sold a bill of goods based on that fear and greed.
That's a very satisfactory answer. Made me feel good. We're near or close to the bottom. If I follow up with that, maybe just a quick follow up question.
Well, let me just say, I think that the odds are we're closer to a bottom than another waterfall decline. Okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we're at the bottom. It's
Totally.
just that I think the bias is towards it being closer to a bottom than to, a top.
So I think that's where I was going to go is, definitely don't take your word, our word for it, right?
Yeah.
Like I think each person needs to be able to go do their own research. And that's what I was going to ask you next is, as like a lot of the folks that listen to my podcast that I pull, or like there's a lot of us that are just first time investors and we're going through this for the first time. And my ask is what indicators, I hear that term of like, maybe we're bouncing along the bottom, or maybe we're nearing the bottom, or maybe there's potential for an upswing. And it's cool to hear that. I mean, especially from you, right? Like that's, you've obviously, you've done your homework, you're in the weeds, but if I wanted to go put my hands on it and see it for myself and do my own homework, what variables or what are you looking at to detect and maybe even use as an indicator of, hey, we're potentially bouncing along the bottom here, or we're nearing the bottom? Like what types of data points or gut feels, like what are you using?
I think that seasonality is one thing, and So back since 2002, when I first started looking into seasonality and discovered the October lows, now I'm the chairman of the Foundation for the Study of Cycles. So obviously, I think this stuff is significant. So I think that's one of the things we're setting up for a classic October low. And so I think there has to be a bias in that direction. You see everybody throwing in the towel. The sentiment is just in the crapper, sentiment is crushed. People are discouraged. People are giving up. You're not seeing the stories in the media about, hey, I bought triple QQQ so I can, get all my money back that I lost. You were seeing those stories back in March and April, right? Like, this is going to come back. I know it. Tech's going to come back. I'm loading up on the triple Qs, because, and now people are not talking about it. So psychologically, sentiment wise, we're definitely at a negative extreme. There's also some positive divergences showing up in some of the kind of secondary data like market breadth and things like that, where we're not making new lows in those things, even though we are making new lows in the stock market. So these are things that experienced people look at, and they're all, hinting that that a bottom is more likely than not.
Maybe one more. This is advice. You're talking to me. This isn't a broad. It's hard to give. There's not a silver bullet answer for everyone, but you're right. Back in late 2021, and we've reflected on this a few times. You were very transparent, and here's my perspective on the market, and it's time to start getting some dry powder. And you were talking about what you were doing with your portfolio. You're very open with that. Let's say someone's followed us along that journey and they didn't listen, or maybe like today, October 13th, it's the first time they've plugged in and they felt like having diamond hands, because we hear that all the time. Like maybe that was the best thing to do. It's like, keep those diamond hands and hold on. Actually, I'll pull that movie I told you about earlier. I pulled a quote from this guy that through this chaos, he lost his house, he lost his girlfriend, he lost this. And so he's living out of his car. And he's like, once a week, I jump into this hotel, I shower, I charge my stuff. I pulled a quote from him this morning because I knew we were going to go this direction. He said, I have no idea why a sane person would hold on more strongly to money that's sinking. He said, I don't know, maybe it's just human behavior. And my question to you is, now we're at a point, we heard those numbers earlier of the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, Bitcoin, Ethereum, things are being like cut in half. And those that have had diamond hands are now feeling those losses. Is it too late? Like at this point, you've held it, it's cut in half. If we're talking about Bitcoin or what, if you're holding the S&P 500, it's a 25% chop. Now, do you just let that thing ride, or does the question make sense, or is it could you sell and reallocate?
It does make sense. And look, I mean, given that I think that the odds are closer, that we're closer to a bottom than not, I don't think that right now is the time to sell. If it were me, I wouldn't be selling. But, it always depends on people's individual situations. If you need the money in the next 6 months, then you got to sell. Yeah. Like you got to take the bid, as they say, right? Whatever somebody's willing to pay for it and you need liquidity, then you got to sell. If you don't, then hold on. So it's all about, your time horizon and your current situation. Maybe there's a better trade, maybe you need to pay rent, or maybe you need to buy a house or something.
Yeah.
So it all depends on the individual person. I think overall, if you have time, then this is not the time to be liquidating when everybody else is.
If you were holding because of the mindset of diamond hands, keep them now.
Look, if you are holding with the mindset of diamond hands, then you're not even worried about this.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're just pretending you've got diamond hands, and you're just kind of part of a diamond hand tribe, but you don't really mean it, then yeah, you're in pain right now. Because diamond hands means you're willing to hold to zero. You're in this for some other reason besides just making a fortune. Okay. So diamond hands means like you believe in the future of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever your diamond hands are. I mean, if you believe in like GameStop and Bed Bath and Beyond as diamond hands, I can't help you. You know, there's reason to be diamond hands for Bitcoin or Ethereum if you believe in some new future, some better future that those things are going to enable, then by all means be diamond hands. You know, if you're just diamond hands because of some kind of speculation game, man, you're screwed. You are the patsy at the table. You're being played, and yeah, you better get out because it's not going to get any better. You know, and that frankly is where most people are. We're kind of kidding ourselves that we're diamond hands. Really, it's just a narrative to explain the fact that we don't want to sell. We don't want to take a loss.
Totally.
And that narrative, man, it's so understood by the long-term participants in the market, and they are taking the money out of your pockets. They're taking the money out of your diamond hands because they know, you know, you've got loss aversion and you don't want to sell when you have losses, and it's that stinking simple. And you can call it whatever you want. You can call it diamond hands. You can pretend you're part of a tribe, but really you just hate to lose and you don't want to sell, and you didn't do it way back when. And now you're hoping, God, maybe I can get out of here when I get back to break even, you know? And so if that's what's going on inside, and you have to be honest and say whether that's what's going on inside you or not, you know, then you really ought to rethink your involvement in the markets, period.
That was powerful. We've got people playing diamond hands. That was awesome.
Playing diamond hands because it like makes you part of a group.
Very tribal. I feel that for sure.
Very tribal. It's very tribal. Absolutely. And you're being sold that tribalism, right? Somebody's making money off that tribalism.
You mentioned QQQ earlier, and that's
TQQQ, right?
Yeah.
The triple
tech
QQQ.
sector. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let me share this. I thought this was really cool. Share screen 2. I'm going to replay this and then I'll just ask my question because this graph is a little slow, but this shows the S&P 500, sort of the top tier folks, right? The industry leaders. And I think this does a really good job at showing, I mean, S&P 500 is US specific, but this shows the number of companies within each sector and how that changes year over year from 69 to 2019. My question, my point, us being newer into the investing market, we've been just in this sick, crushing time as an investor, the millennial folks, right? And so
is it sick crushing correction or sick crushing like good all the way up?
Yeah, I think a monkey could have invested into the market and just went to the moon, right?
So sick and crushing are good things.
all positive things.
All right.
And so
got to get my language
totally
right.
Man. Yeah, this is a 2-part investing and lingo podcast. If you look, I mean, and I'll replace this as I'm talking, but
that's an awesome graphic.
Oh, it's so cool. And
I'm mesmerized.
What I think is interesting is the rise of IT, the rise of tech, of e-commerce through the years, right? Which makes a lot of sense. But it's all we've known. And over the last year, Apple and Google have announced hiring freezes. Meta recently announced a hiring freeze. You've seen layoffs from Vimeo, Tesla, Substack, Netflix, Twitter. The tech world is, I'll use the word crumbling. I feel like I can do that because I'm in tech. I work on the AWS cloud. And so the tech world is doing its thing. And this graph shows that, you know, through time, different segments emerge, and it hasn't always just been a tech-driven economy. Our hands shifting, and I think that's maybe like, could you tell us a little bit about maybe where the puck is going if your gut tells you anything, or maybe tech will rebound? I'm just curious, like, you know, I think this does a good job at showing at times it was energy, at times it was utilities, at times it was healthcare. We've recently been riding this tech wave. Any idea, gut feel, what's next?
Well, for a while, I've been talking about my problems with technology, right? Surveillance capitalism, and all that.
Yeah.
And I really think that technology has a kind of an underbelly, a dark side that people are starting to really come to terms with. It's a very manipulative economy, especially the attention economy, right? And kind of the control of data to modify our behavior for corporate profit purposes, right? So I really think that's an existential issue in technology, right? There's lots of different aspects to technology. You can talk about, semiconductor companies, for example, right? They're building the tools of technology. But like Google, Apple, Facebook, Meta, even Tesla to some degree, this idea of the attention economy, I think, is really coming under justified doubts and questions. And I think that a lot of the marketing of technology is built on a fundamental lie, right? So take Robinhood in the financial markets, right? Been talking about them for a long time. The idea that they're democratizing investing, right? And the idea that they're creating more choice for you when really they're presenting a set of choices to you, all of which have some level of benefit to them. And so it appears to be an environment of choice, but really, they're incentivized to present a certain set of choices to you. And those are choices that lead you into more volatile, more speculative areas of the market, because that's where they make the most money when you transact more and more frequently in more volatile and speculative areas of the market. That's their business model. So to go on Robinhood and to think that this is about democratizing investing in some kind of noble pursuits, when in reality, it's a profit model built on the users of the platform, transacting more frequently in more volatile assets. Okay, that's their business model, right? So they're lying, and they're not the only ones. They're lying that they're democratizing investing. They're not. They have a business model. It's a decent business model. They're not transparent about it. They had to get called out by the SEC. They had to get sued in order to start telling the truth. And they're not alone. So this is a problem in technology. This is a problem with Google, with Apple, with Meta, with Tesla. They're all doing things in their business model that they're not transparent with about their users. With their users, okay? It's the user as product business model. And the idea, as I've said many times, that somehow the metaverse is going to be a kind of utopian place where we're, liberated from the shackles that bind us to this messy, wet biology world, embodied world, right? Where we can only be in one place at once. No, we can fly all over the metaverse now and, interact with whoever we want to, but it's not life. Okay. It's a simulation. And so there's another lie, right? The idea that you're going to be fulfilled in the metaverse in a way that you're not fulfilled in your physical life, right, is a lie. Okay. So those things, the fact that I see so much lying in technology, and the fact that I know they're lying really makes me question whether or not technology is going to come back. And, a simple illustrative point, there was a great article in Bloomberg this last week about self-driving cars. They've spent $100 billion on self-driving cars, and self-driving cars can't make left turns into oncoming traffic. Okay. They don't call these left turns now. They call them uncontrolled left turns. Okay. So Self-driving cars can make left turns, of course, but they can't make uncontrolled left turns. Every stinking left turn is uncontrolled. Okay. So this language is ridiculous, right? So the way this came to light is because there's a lady in San Francisco, and Google's cars are coming into her driveway and turning around and making 3-point turns in her parking garage to avoid making a left turn at a particular intersection. Right. And she calls Google and, Uber, and nobody will admit that this is happening until she calls the local media and says, could you come out here and film all these, self-driving cars that are, coming into my parking garage instead of, making this left turn? And then the media gets it. And then all of a sudden, those cars go away. So self-driving cars can't tell what to do if a pigeon flies in front of it, right? Because we know, like, don't slow down, you'll get rear-ended. You could cause a worse accident, and the bird's probably going to get out of the way. But the self-driving car can't figure that out, right? So the idea of artificial intelligence, that you have to kind of program every single possible scenario, right, in an infinitely complex environment, it's not going to work, okay? But yet they've spent $100 billion and they've sold shareholders a bill of goods, right? And they've described this world where, we're not going to be driving anymore. We're all going to be chauffeured around, and our cities are going to transform because we're not going to have parking garages anymore. And what are we going to do with all this extra space? Yada, 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 right? It's a lie, okay? Maybe they believe it. But the fact is, human beings can do things that artificial intelligence can't. And it's because we're actually connected to different dimensions than can be measured by artificial intelligence. So this is a fact. And the industry is, just telling it, it's talking its own book over and over again, building these pie in the sky scenarios, which really just enrich the early developers of these companies that then get investments and public shareholders, et cetera, right? So you really have to watch out for this in the technology space. And I really think that kind of aspect of technology being able to tell a fantastical story that's not going to come true in order to reap hundreds of billions of dollars of investment and good salaries for a period of time and lots of status and media stories. I hope that's coming to an end.
Yeah, they've definitely been exposed, or it feels that way. Right?
Yeah,
Like
and rightfully
you see valuations taking hit for sure.
Rightfully so. They deserve every single stinking bit of it.
Yeah. I'm going to sandwich. I started with a show, HBO show. I'm going to sandwich this with a, earlier I mentioned I sell AWS. I've been in AWS, or I've been working in that ecosystem for 8-ish years now. And I'm on the sales side of things. And one of my favorite messages, like whenever I don't get a response from someone and I'm working this opportunity, is like my breakup email is Richard dash, have you given up? And the email is that simple. It's like, hey, Richard, we talked for 6 months and then I haven't heard from you. Have you given up on this project? Let me know. That thing crushes and that crushes is a good thing. People for some, internally cannot stand the idea of giving up on a project, or even having the idea that someone out there thinks that they gave up on a project. They just can't stand the endurance and being able to endure physically and mentally is almost a universal language across industries, true language barriers. Like, people love grit. And my point is, I am a runner, and in the mornings at the moment, I am listening to this audio book called Quit by Annie Duke. Have you seen or heard of this one?
I have heard of it, and I have not bought it yet.
It is,
but this is the book I wish I wrote myself.
It is so damn good. It
I
is
wrote,
so
I brought trailing stops basically, to the market. And it was all the stuff I did was about, knowing when to sell, right?
mm,
Loss aversion, et cetera. So it's
this.
so brilliant that this
Oh,
title Quit,
listen,
is just absolutely brilliant. I don't know if she thinks these up or if she has some agency that thinks them up for her or publisher, but yeah, that's
bonkers. Uh,
fantastic.
I will just riff a little bit, and I'd love, maybe you get a chance to dig into it at some point. I'd love just to hear your maybe perspective on what she's trying to get across. But let me just unpack it for a little bit, and I haven't
She's
completed it
talking
yet.
about loss aversion.
100%. But what
She's
the way that she relays it, and maybe it's because I've got Ali sitting over my shoulder, is me
right.
talking about people hating the idea of quitting and
Yeah.
being mesmerized
Yeah.
and almost heroing, looking at people and putting them in a spotlight of like, look at
Mm-hmm.
this person. They just have so much grit and they don't quit. And
Mm-hmm.
that same persistence, that same grit where Ali had over 61 fights. It's like the same thing that got them into the room where, they're the first
Mm-hmm.
person on the track, the last person to leave, this, that is the same thing on the back half of their career that keeps them from quitting and ends up being the other edge of the sword. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled up Ali's story and she does a great job of relaying this, but I highlighted he had
Mm-hmm.
61 fights, lost 5. Right. And this is his very last fight here. It's a stoppage by Larry Holmes.
Yeah.
Let's see. This is obviously got stopped. It was the first ever Ali stoppage, his last fight of his career. Then it goes on and says the fight was awful. Sylvester Stallone was on ringside for the fight and said it was like watching an autopsy of a man that was still alive. I mean, the man was just, he's
I remember
zombified out there.
watching the Ken Burns Ali series,
Mm.
and it was hard to watch.
Couldn't put the gloves down, right? It's just
Yeah.
impossible. This type of person, and it's not only athletes that have this, business owners, mountain climbers, relationships, just like you talked about, investing.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your perspective. Maybe it's not on the book. Maybe it's just on this mindset that she's trying to relay, but it's hitting home for me. Like you said, I felt like it was right down your fairway. You're obviously familiar with it. I'd love to get your perspective if you have one.
Yeah. Well, I need to read the book. There's lots of different um, relationships in life, right? You can talk about investing and you can talk about marriage,
Mm.
family, children, right? There's sometimes that you don't quit.
Do you feel like you're a good
So,
quitter?
I feel like I've become a much better quitter.
Mm.
I don't feel like I've mastered quitting by any stretch. And I have a hard time saying no,
Yeah.
right? And I'm interested in a lot of different things. And, I can't remember the exact quote from Steve Jobs, but when you're in business, especially if you're an entrepreneur, it's not so much about what you do as what you don't do, right?
Mm.
Kind of that idea of focus. So it, like everything, it depends.
Yeah.
Sorry not to
I-
have a pat answer, but and when it comes to the financial markets, you definitely got to know when to
Mm.
quit, and you have to know like what level of grit you have, right? What level of risk tolerance you can take, how long you can hang on. So it's a balance between kind of knowing how much grit you got and when you need to quit so that you're quitting on your terms, right?
Mm.
And not on somebody else's terms, right? You don't want to have a stoppage in your fight like Ali did with
Totally.
Holmes, right? You don't want to get to the point where somebody else is taking you out of the game because you're not in control anymore, right? So I think that's a good thing to aspire to, right? That
Mm.
you can leave on your own terms and that, somebody else isn't taking you out of the game with a stoppage or a margin call or whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? So
Uh,
anyway, I
I
love the idea of the book. I think the title is absolutely brilliant.
mm.
And hats off to Annie Duke, man.
I felt like she
she's
took an
nailing it.
arrow out. Yeah, I feel
She's
like she took an
nailing it.
arrow out and put it right in my
Yeah,
chest with this one, man.
she's
I
brilliant.
have
I hope
Sisyphus.
to meet her someday.
Sure, man. Maybe this will get to her. We'll clip it.
All right.
I have Sisyphus tattooed on my chest. The idea of like him pushing the rock up the hill.
Wow.
That fits. I not quitting is in my blood. And when
Okay.
as I listen to her, I feel like she just hit me right in the gut where I
Wow.
needed it to be.
Yep.
If you can put a framework or responsibilities or something on me that gives me foundation, I will do that thing to death, is just how I operate. And so this was a really, really powerful book, and where you're headed.
What
I mean,
it's
this is
making me think
super
of
powerful.
is the Bruce Kovner quote that 90% of risk management is knowing when you'll sell before you buy. Right. So if you think about that, the thing that you are going to put your heart and soul into, that you're going to go all in on, you should have an idea about what your goal is and, when would you sell before you buy, right? So then you can keep your grit, you can keep your strength, and then at least you've premeditated on, when would it be, hey, I just, this just isn't in the cards, right? Gave it a shot, but it's not in the cards. Let's adjust, let's tack.
Having that floor before getting in, that's in everything, man. She talks about that with someone climbing Everest. Like at Everest, they say at 1 o'clock or whatever, you need to turn around and start coming down the mountain. And because you've trained for months and months, or if you're a fighter, a UFC fighter, you've done an 8-week camp, and then you get into the octagon and then your jaw is broken or something bad happens. The athlete themselves, they're not going to quit. Like at that point, grit is all they have. And so they're going to stay on. So the coaches and the people around them have to say, hey, here's the frameworks we have in place. And if you get to this point, or for Everest, when 1 o'clock hits, no matter what, I'm throwing in the towel, or you turn around. Exactly.
Totally. Yep.
Man, I had one more, but I'm looking at my time and I think I'm going to save it. This was super, super
covered
awesome,
some
man.
Good ground.
Yeah. I appreciate you giving me a few minutes, man. Happy Thursday.
Awesome. You too. Have a great couple of weeks. Look forward to talking again soon.
You too. Cheers.
Bye.